As the Minister ascends the podium, we would like to request the driver of the following black Mercedes ML JHY 351GP to kindly remove the car as it is on the way of another car. JHY 351GP. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, program directors. The former president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, and Sis Zanele. The Kumalo family, the Matikizela family, the Mbata family, members of the cabinet, of the political parties, the ANC, members of parliament, members of provincial legislatures, MECs, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the media, fellow mourners. Let me say, the former president, you won't believe how I agonized about this protocol. I was saying to cashiers, it seems wrong that I will speak after former President Mbeki. Can't you tweak the protocol a bit? I even used my torn ligament that I can't stand for too long, so I'll just make a short speech and then he can. It didn't work, so here am I. And it was not because I didn't want to speak about Dumisani, but it was because I didn't want to follow somebody I consider as my principal, as my boss, because former president was part of the reason why I went to exile in the 70s. So he's been my boss for a long, long time. But let me also apologize for the President of the Republic, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Deputy President for not being here. They would have loved to be here, motivated by the person that Ambassador Dumisani was. His stature in our society is confirmed by the overwhelming flood of messages and condolences and of sympathy to the family, to the government, to our missions abroad, from all over the world. Sis Domgais ngijwayele ukuthi Nobut Henry, the children, the grandchildren, the entire family, we also echo those words of condolences and wish to also offer our words of gratitude to you and the Kumalo family for having surrendered to our struggle, these dedicated activists, and a great sign of the soil. Sithalwe hlanga lungehlanga, bomtungu, bomzilikazi, bomashobana. Indeed, the departure of Ambassador Kumalo has left all of us in deep shock, slowly recognizing that the second generation of our founder leaders of our glorious movement has slowly left us. And today we bid farewell to a convocant of the next generation of freedom fighters whose activism blossomed during the Black consciousness era of our struggle. Ambassador Kumalo was a living testament that Black people always had consciousness about their being and about their suffering. He also comes from a very rich lineage of warriors. King Mzilikazi Kumalo being one of the most eminent. King Mzilikazi left the great nation of the King Shaka Kasenzangakhona after having served as a lieutenant general. His departure was motivated in large measure by the desire to avoid what would have been a catastrophic bloodbath. His track saw him establishing diplomatic relations with nations such as the Basutus before he finally settled in what is now called Matebele land in Bulawayo, around Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. We detail this history not because we want to show our intertwined history with the people of Zimbabwe, but because we want to show that Ambassador Kumalo displays that his heritage equipped him with the basic intuitive fighting spirit he utilized throughout his life. Fellow mourners, it is no coincidence that Ambassador Kumalo's initial political consciousness was ignited at the Wilberforce Community College. Wilberforce Community College was actually established by one of our heroines, Umama Xeke, with the very purpose of igniting the consciousness of the African child, pursuance of patriotism, knowledge, and unity amongst the oppressed masses. In those days, of course, many colleges had different streams under one roof. One stream was teacher training, other the artists, the painters, and the other stream, those who pursued agriculture, commerce, and other trades. This was indeed a cross-pollination of knowledge and experience, which produced a very well-rounded, capable student. And many of those students played meaningful roles in society. And of course, of prime importance in those institutions was the pursuit of spirituality, hard work, compassion, solidarity, and patriotism. The educational foundation that Ambassador Kumalo had accounts for his love for imparting knowledge to others, and also the pursuit of lifelong knowledge himself. I learned a lot from Ambassador Kumalo. If you are a minister of foreign affairs, you have two main bosses. You have the president on one side and the ambassador on the other. And the ambassadors will influence the direction that the country also takes. We could never take a decision about what should happen in New York in foreign affairs without having touched base with Ambassador Kumalo, because we knew he was a reservoir of knowledge about that area. And it's not surprising that whereas the normal tour of duty is 4 years to a mission, but he spent 10 years in New York. I also suppose this accounts for his love for poetry and the Persian poet Rumi, which almost everybody has spoken about. Just as Rumi advised, Ambassador Kumalo did all things from his soul. And Rumi says, I quote, "When you do things from your soul, you feel a river moving you." And Ambassador Kumalo was like that. It was like there was a river moving him as he moved around the corridors of New York and many other cities. The combination of having been rooted in the Wilberforce way, which promotes compassion and a deep sense of justice, must have motivated Ambassador Kumalo to become a journalist, but a journalist who inquires about the truth and a journalist who's principled. Of course, he would eventually become one of the founding members of the Union of Black Journalists, and eventually got involved, as everybody has said, and left the country. Ambassador Kumalo, with his education, an articulate person, experienced, could have easily left the country and pursued a trade and forgot about the people of South Africa, as many have done, but also as many didn't do. But Ambassador Kumalo chose to put all his energies, his weight, onto the struggle for liberation in New York, in America, as he pursued his studies. And as everybody has said, how much action he took to persuade the Americans, the ordinary people, so that they could persuade the people who were decision makers in New York and Washington to take the right decisions. Fellow mourners, principled was the man who was Ambassador Kumalo. Almost 18 years after the Reagan veto reversal, when confronted with the matter of Iraq in the UN Security Council, he maintained the same principle, even though he wasn't a member of the Security Council at the time. And I'd like to quote what he said at the time. I quote, "Organizations like the UN were founded to preserve peace, not to support wars. The UN needs to focus more on helping poor people. This is why it would be a shame if there was a war. If this war goes on, it means the price of oil goes through the roof. It is the poor people who will rely on paraffin who will suffer. It would be the farmers who rely on diesel. War for us is a non-starter," I close quote. And he said this against the powerful of the world who were contemplating the war. Of course, the war did continue in the end, and we know even today what that war has brought, not only to the world, but to the people of Iraq. It has visited untold suffering, as he predicted. That is why we relied on Ambassador Kumalo in the United Nations for over a decade. We were certain that he was unshakable in maintaining the principles by which our liberation movement and democracy is founded. As many have said, Ambassador Kumalo was larger than life. Even in those cold corridors in the United Nations, his belting laughter could be heard across and beyond the walls. And Ambassador Kumalo approached every task with the same vigor. Whether he was chairing the non-aligned movement, the Security Council, the groups of 77 plus China, and many others. Whether it was consultations or the various missions he undertook to places like East Timor, Guinea-Bissau, he would be as passionate. Ambassador Kumalo had exceptional interpersonal skills and the ability to befriend and unite either side of the negotiation table. He was equally loved and revered by friend and foe. Every delegation from every department would return with the same tale. He was strict and uncompromising taskmaster who was a stickler for time and even dress code. He was known to seek only high quality from everyone. And once all the work and tasks were completed, he, together with Usistik, would serve the best meals and wine that side of the Atlantic, despite having given up drinking himself. Full of life and humility, Ambassador Kumalo knew by name every security and cleaning personnel at our mission and even at the United Nations. And you would walk with him and he would be inquiring, see this security, how are you? And you'd be asking about the family and how they are getting on in life. And he would be asking this cleaner about her own situation. And he displayed just love, not only for his immediate family, but for humanity. And of course, many a delegation would sometimes be held up in long queues as he is still talking to people at the UN. South Africa could not have chosen a better representative to protect, promote, defend the interest of our nation and continent during those critical 10 years. We have spoken of the overwhelming messages we received following the news of Ambassador Kumalo's passing. One such message came from the President of Western Sahara and the SG of the Polisario, His Excellency President Brahim Gali, who says, I quote, Ambassador Kumalo worked wholeheartedly to promote and defend African interests and issues, including his passion and firm support for the right of the Saharan people for self-determination and freedom. We are grateful to his steadfast and principled positions. We would like to pay tribute to his great moral qualities and dedication, close quote. Fellow mourners, Ambassador Kumalo was a citizen of the world, and yet he spent most of his time imparting knowledge and inspiring the young of our nation. In the Department of Foreign Affairs then, there is what is colloquially known as the University of Dumisani Kumalo, whose members are now placed throughout the world and are no doubt further imparting knowledge. This was his passion. He made sure that he doesn't rise alone, but he carries everybody with him. We've also heard that he did the same thing as the CEO of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. He was conscious that the struggle is not over and that a new crop of bright, educated, and skilled African leaders will be needed in the journey to transform our country and grow our continent. Fellow mourners, what do you say when such a bright light has been put out? This is the question we must ask ourselves about Ambassador Kumalo's departure. But I think what we should say is that we are actually taking comfort in that we were privileged to have known and worked with him. We must take solace in the knowledge that thousands have received knowledge and guidance from Ambassador Kumalo. And so he lives amongst, and he is going to continue his work through the lives of those he has touched. One takes relief in the knowledge that the principles by which Ambassador Kumalo lived by remain an important guiding star to ours and future generations. Mtungwa, Mashoban, the bells have rung. Your welcoming reception by our departed heroes and heroines is in session. Let them know that we remain steadfast in our mission to grow South Africa together towards the total liberation of all peoples of Africa in the continent. Let them know that we are determined to eradicate poverty, unemployment, and inequality. That we will not rest until the skills revolution sweeps our country and continent, securing a better life for all our people. Let them know that we will not rest until the people of Sahrawi and Palestine are free and until our continent knows peace and the guns are silent. Inform them that we shall not rest on our laurels until a just and transformed world is reached, where no African child knows any hunger and malnutrition, but is in command of his or her destiny through the mastery of education and his or her talent. We shall not rest until our children and youth are ready for the fourth industrial revolution. Let the welcoming reception know that we are steadfast marching on, and we are at the foothills of the realization of a more just and equitable world. As South Africa, once again, we are going to be assuming our seat in the United Nations, and we'll follow in your footsteps as you were the first one to lead us in that journey. We will not rest until the global governing system are fully representative of our world, so that we in the developing world and on the continent constitute a significant and meaningful constituency in those levers of power. Let them know that our first 10-year plan towards Agenda 2063 is under implementation, and that the restoration of the dignity of our people on the continent is well underway. Let them know that we are fully ready to pick up your spear, and we are determined more than ever before that through our joint efforts, South Africa shall grow, Africa will unite, be prosperous and peaceful as our forebearers directed. Lala ngoxolo, mfana kithi, Ntungwa, Mashobana, Msilikazi. May your soul rest in eternal peace, Dumisani. You loved life, and I'm sure where you're going, you'll be able to drag a few to the jazz club as you did. Even drag me to the jazz club. Thank you.